Well, there's a couple of things. One is, so one of the major issues I think all museums face when they have people speaking is the sound bleed. So I know that as a curator, there's a little bit of a challenge with our education department, because when they take students through the museum, if the screens have too much volume, the way we take students around the museum is one guide takes about 6 or 8 students, and there's a conversation going on. So other sound in the background bleeding into those conversations is annoying for the museum guides. So they tend to try and turn things down, and then I usually come through the museum and there's no one in there, and I'm like, you can't hear anything. So I'm going around turning everything back up. So that was one issue. So we put the story pods in this other room, so that, and it's a wider room, there's just more room, people can go through the middle and people can be on the sides accessing the information in the story pods. It just was the logical place to put it, but you do always have to be mindful of where you put screens versus static displays. It has to all work in together.
Yeah. Right.
The exhibition designers, that's their challenge, I guess. What you need, first of all, is more space in a museum. We cram quite a bit into a short space, so that issue of the sound bleed really relates back to space. If people could walk into a little booth, a little separate, and watch material that's more soundproofed, little mini cinemas are great to have little alcoves that people can go in and engage with more visual media, audio. So it's great to have the space to be able to walk away. I'd also like people that entry point to a museum, some museums do it brilliantly, where it is a big screen experience. You get a screen experience and then you go into the museum. So I think that's great. The better they get, the sound we have in the museums, they come from these cones that sit above the screens, and they're pretty good, but we need it much more like Get Smart's cone of silence, where something lowers over your head. And it's always this challenge, because the best thing is when people put headphones on, and you have a whole bank of them and everyone can come up, put their own headphone on. That sound doesn't bleed at all. You get to hear a really good quality sound. But these are challenging things, having a whole bank of headphones that are always working. That's another issue.
And does it feel old-fashioned these days to have the headphones
I know,
there?
I mean,
it's sort of a hard thing, yeah.
I went to Mona, the art gallery in Tasmania, and it's all very cutting edge, and you get your own, it's almost like an iPad. It's called the iPod. It's like the O. And you get your own headphones, and everyone's walking around and you're looking at art. There's no labels, and all the information is on these screens and via the headphones. And I don't like it at all, because I found too many people are walking around with headphones on, staring at little screens, trying to read, trying to find things, and not really engaging with the art or having... If you go to a museum with someone and you both got headphones on, so you miss the opportunity to actually have dialogue with each other. Because although you can tap the person, they might be in the middle of listening to something, they don't want to be disturbed. So the good thing that Mona does is you can come home and it's tracked your visit, and you can download everything that you've looked at. Now, I would love this as a future idea, that people could walk around. If there's something they're interested in, they press a button, and then when they get home, all the information and extra material on those subjects can suddenly appear before them. Other items we've got in the collection. Because when you're walking around a museum, there's a limit to how much you can read, how much you can take in. But sometimes when you go back, you're home, you've got more time to explore the things that you're really interested in. So I see it as a bit of the idea of it stimulating your interest. But there's, people cannot read books on walls. There's just a limit. So, 1 hour tour through the museum, and that's being generous, because a lot of people, the students only get 20 minutes or so. But if you've got an hour and you walk around the museum, you can take in quite a bit. But you might, it might be better to be able to reflect at home. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was where the story pods, this is what I forgot to mention before, where did they come from? They actually came from a really old school idea. I mean, I prefer old style museums, not much technology. You know, that's what I like. I like looking at objects and what's the story? Why is that cutlery on display? You know, it's just a knife and fork, and then you read a whole story. So the objects, they're ordinary objects, but they take you into these extraordinary stories. Now, the story pod idea came from the fact that we had, let's say, 20 or 30 survivor guides. And depending which day you came, you'd encounter, you know, Abby and David, but not Lucia, and, you know, so whatever day you came was just random which survivors you would meet. And then you wouldn't meet all the others. So I started thinking, oh, how can we have all their stories? Like, they've come every week for so many years. It would be great if their stories were the feature stories in the museum. So it started with just a basic arch lever folder for each survivor who guided, and it was a bank of them on the wall. Each one had their own folder, and it was a picture book. It had on each page one photo. It could be a photo from their family, it could be a photo of something they had on, you know, an item, an artefact, a Jewish star. So each page, it told their stories in about 8 or 10 pages. An image is like a picture book, an image and a bit of text, image, a bit of text. It was, you could stand there and in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, you could take in one person's story, and you could dabble in a few of them. So out of these came the idea of, for each survivor, let's have a drawer, and you pull out a drawer, and there is their star, the real star, and there is a photo, and there's a bit of text, and that's their story. But it was like, it ended up being about 30 stories. So where were we going to find? We needed a big space to have 30 drawers that you could pull out. And so then the technological sort of solution came about. Well, let's have this virtual drawer, virtual desk for each survivor. So the visitor comes and they're like a historian, and they open the drawer, or they get to the desk. This is Lucia's desk. Wow, look, what's in this folder? And then you touch on the folder, and there appears all her items. So you're discovering their story, and that was really how it all sort of evolved into being the desk. And that was also the chance meeting with Abhijit, who had come to the Holocaust Centre to do a photography project, photographing survivors, and this was many years ago, and before the museum had been upgraded, and he said, you know, you really could do with some better technology. And I told him that we were planning on upgrading the museum, and he said, well, you know, give me a chance, I've got some ideas, let me show you what I could do. And, you know, it turned out that photography was just his hobby, and he was actually a computer engineer, programmer, guru, and he came up with the StoryPod concept. So that was, you know, it was matching an idea, a need, with someone who had the technological skills. And then I guess the great thing about Abhijit was he also had a great design aesthetic. So he came up with the whole metaphor of making it look old and making it look like a desk. So yeah, that's really the history of the evolution of the StoryPods. So yeah, I'm very happy with the outcome, and it is sometimes quite random how these things evolve.
Many thanks to Jayne for generously giving us some of her time. I look forward to talking to you again soon as we move into our last module of the unit. Bye for now.